Welcome to Take It from the Ironwoman. My name is Susanne Müller, your host and the Ironwoman. This podcast is about empowering yourself and others to make real changes in the world. You will hear from everyday, smart, sophisticated, hip people like you and me. Not everybody has to be an Ironwoman to impress the world. Together, we will learn from the sports and business leaders how you can become a more successful person as an entrepreneur or a leader. It's one step at a time, one day at a time. Take your steps now. Take your big steps now. Join me on this journey to success. Take it from the Ironwoman. We only have special guests, and I'm very honored to have Melanie Ho with us. She is the award-winning author of Beyond Leaning In. The book is about gender equity and what organizations are up to against. We'll hear more about that. She's also a founder of Strategic Imagination, a firm dedicated to the power of the arts to help businesses and nonprofit active transformational change. She has a Ph.D. in English. What else?
I have done a variety of things in my career. I've been a consultant to university presidents, a corporate executive, a political activist, an author. And I think the running theme throughout all of it was no matter what industry I was working in, I would notice how difficult it was to affect any kind of real change. That even if people knew where they wanted to go, it was hard to get there. That it was hard for any organization to achieve transformation as boldly as they wanted to, or as quickly as they wanted to. And I started across my career to notice this common thread, which is how the arts, whether fiction or comics or theater, could help people get out of their stuck mindsets.
It's I just read the book, The Moonwalking with Einstein. It's a creativity that helps with innovation. So those two things go together. Interesting.
And so that's why I ended up writing my book, Beyond Leaning In. It's a business book. You'll find it in the business section or women's studies or organizational psychology of a bookstore or library, but it's written as a novel. And it follows a fictional company where we have a CEO who's trying to figure out, even though she herself has smashed glass ceilings and she has mentored and supported women across her career, she's finding out that a lot of the women who are of younger generations are quitting at higher rates than men. And the story is her journey as she's trying to understand what's harder, what are the frustrations for rising millennial-ish leaders today. But we also go back and forth between the perspectives of male characters, female characters, all levels of the organizational chart across the book. And I hope that it helps readers both make sense of their own experiences, but also understand and build empathy for characters unlike themselves.
And how did it all come about? I'm always curious, what were pivotal moments in your life that said, now is the time? I'm very happy that that book is here, and congratulations on the award-winning. What triggered it?
Oh, gosh. I think there's probably a few different key moments. Some of it actually started out when I was in high school. And I was really fascinated by books like The Jungle and Uncle Tom's Cabin and Silent Spring, and these books that I read about that were novels, but that actually had an impact on social movements and how people thought about these important issues. I ended up designing my own major at UCLA as an undergraduate. And I called it policy and media studies because I wanted it to sound marketable. But it was actually a combination of literature, film, news media, advertising, politics, policy, sociology, psychology. And what I was trying to understand is, well, how do messages come through what we think of as storytelling and art versus what we think of as information, news, for example. I went on to get my PhD. I wrote a dissertation called Useful Fiction, looking at the novel as a kind of self-help and how novels in the early 20th century helped. The early 20th century is a lot like now. There's so much rapid change. It was a very confusing time. And how novels helped people make sense of that. Then I ended up in corporate America for 12 years, and I had kind of put all of that behind me. But as I was entering into leadership positions, starting to notice a lot of the challenges women were facing at work. We could talk about more of those. I began to visit this idea of using a novel as a way to talk about them. And as a parallel in my corporate career, one of the things that I did was manage a team that did consulting for college and university presidents. And they were trying to figure out, well, higher education has to change in pretty dramatic ways. How do they get their teams to do that? How do they think in bigger ways? And they had asked us to look outside of industry for just what do the most innovative organizations do. I came across this book called Leading Transformation about Lowe's, the hardware store, not the hotel chain, and how they hired science fiction writers and comic book artists. It was sort of like all of those moments where everything feels like it's coming together. I was on the one hand writing this business book that was written as a novel because I truly felt that was the best way to engage with DEI topics. My team was doing work with college and university presidents where we were using the tools of science fiction in the same way that Lowe's and Boeing and Nike and other companies have done to help vision things. I was returning back to this research I had done back as an undergraduate and PhD student at UCLA and thinking about the different role of the arts. And all of this led to, during the first year of the pandemic, I became an early adopter of the Great Resignation, thinking this is a long time passion I've had. I don't know exactly what I want to do with it, but let me start by finishing this book.
Good idea. Before we recorded, we were discussing the Great Resignation for you is something positive. It's not something negative. You found the calling, and listening to you, it feels like now is the time that you pull everything together.
I think that so many of us are going through our day to day, and it's fine. It's not that sense of calling. It's not that this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And I had begun to feel, I think my father died about 3 years ago. I turned 40 after that. All these moments where I started to question existentially, what am I here for? What's my purpose in the world? But I was scared. I was scared to make any kind of leap because I had a great job. I had a wonderful team. I loved a lot of the work that I was doing, but yet I knew there was more. There was something else that had been kind of tugging at me. I think all of that time in the pandemic, I spent more time outside, spent more time reflecting, really led me to think, okay, now is the time.
I'm very happy. I always say, now is the time. If not now, then when?
Yes.
I think we're always afraid of change is hard. Every day is different. Every year is different. You are changing. And it's just, we just have to face it and make the best out of it. I many times get the questions, when is the best time to start my own business? Well, there's never a good time. There's never a bad time. Just do it now. And what if it doesn't work out? Then we do something different.
Exactly. I think it's like, what's the worst case scenario? The worst case scenario is I try something else. I had been writing Beyond Leaning In on the side for years. I actually started taking notes about what the book could be in 2013. And in 2017, I started actually writing it. And at the time of 2020, it was about 80% done. And I think if I hadn't quit my job, it probably would have stayed 80% done on my laptop, it'd still be there forever.
Congratulations. It's just, you said leap and lean in. And the American psychologist Carol Gilligan says, leaning in is not enough. We need to step up as women. And my last podcast was, we said, the future is female. Can you maybe talk a little bit about that and the bias that we have here?
The reason I titled the book Beyond Leaning In was because I felt like so much of the narrative around why there are gender gaps in workplaces are because the saying is, well, women aren't confident enough. Women need to lean in. Women need to take their seats at the table. And I think all of that is important, actually. Sheryl Sandberg's book, Lean In, when it came out in 2013, I remember being excited. I remember her famous TED Talk. So many women I know would listen to it right before they were about to ask for a raise or promotion. I think that is so important. I do think we need to lean in. We need to stand up to take our seat at the table. At the same time, I think Lean In ignores a few things. And one of them does get to what the future of leadership needs to be. First, I think leaning as an idea ignores the fact that there are systemic and cultural barriers that make it harder for women to lean in. I drew a comic about a seatbelt, because that's what I think about. It's like you can't lean in when you're strapped back in your seat. I think that the idea of leaning in ignores the fact that women are often unequally rewarded or even penalized when we do lean in. And then finally, and I think this gets to your question, the idea of leaning in often presupposes this idea that women need to be more like men, that there are these ways that men are socialized from birth, really, to interrupt and take up space and talk louder, talk faster. I remember being told in grad school and at work, okay, well, you need to interrupt. You need to talk louder. If somebody's in your way, just like bulldoze them. And women are socialized in quite the opposite way. We're socialized to listen, to understand, to empathize. And when you think about the kinds of challenges that we're facing in today's global economy and with the types of problems we're facing as a society, those are the skills we need. It is the empathy, it's cross-cultural communication, it's the understanding. And that is why I think the future needs to be not just female, but feminine. That those kinds of traits are what everybody, no matter their gender, that's what we all need to strive for.
I couldn't agree more with you. And when you say interrupt, I come from Switzerland, where you only interrupt when you're being asked a question. When I moved to the US, namely in New York, I had to learn to say, I interrupt somebody. And I was like, oh my God, what am I doing here? This was totally unnatural to me. Maybe now I do it a little more, but it doesn't come natural to me. We also have to be comfortable with what we have and what we're brought up, and not try to mimic the behaviors, the bully behaviors, my opinion.
And I think leaders need to be more attentive to it's easier when you're running a meeting to kind of sit back and just let the room play out and let the people who are going to talk the most and to say, hey, well, at least we got stuff done. And there's so much that's getting missed. I think leaders who make a special effort to ensure everybody has a voice and feels heard and is listened to, that doesn't mean that, I think people often think that I like to talk about the importance of amplifying others' voices in meetings. And I think people often think that means, oh, well, does that mean that you're just repeating the people who agree with you? Like, no, amplifying voices doesn't mean that. It means, I use the metaphor from basketball, points versus assists. And in basketball, you can score points yourself. And that is, I think, how a lot of men are socialized. It's their individual contribution. The assist is about the collective aims. And that's what I love to see in really positive meeting cultures. You're amplifying a voice, even if the person disagrees, because that will make the outcome stronger.
Yeah. I like that, amplify. How can we support you? You said you're talking. What is your vision beyond leaning in? What are you doing today?
I'm really always excited to meet readers of Beyond Leaning In, to have as many people encounter the book, hopefully, as possible, for a few reasons. One, I hope that the book helps women make sense of their own experiences. I think so often we as women end up internalizing the biases against us because we don't realize it's systemic, it's cultural. There's research about this. It's something that is happening everywhere. And so I always appreciate hearing from women who have read my book and say to me, this explains so much of what I faced. But I also love talking to male readers. When I first wrote a book called Beyond Leaning In, a lot of people told me that men would never read a book that was about gender equity. But actually, I've got a ton of male readers. I recently attended a book club with all white men over the age of 70 who read the book together. I have attended events that are 40 or 50% men. And I think that's so important. So many women in leadership initiatives that are just women talking to one another. I also draw a lot of comics that are based on scenes from my book. People can find them on Instagram or on my website. And I lead workshops at corporations or conferences where participants, most of whom are non-artists, it probably even works better if one is not an artist. We use the tools of drawing and comics as a way to really engage with topics related to DEI at work, to reflect on workplace bias, to draw potential solutions to it. And I love how art can unlock our imaginations and how art can also help people let their guards down. Because I think when most people are about to enter a DEI session at work, they feel sometimes afraid or defensive, or there's some trepidation there. I think that art can help us feel more comfortable.
And fun. I think.
Yes, and fun. Exactly.
These are exciting times. I like when you say the future is feminine. And I also, what you say, I totally agree with you. We need to work together. So if I say the future is feminine, I want to work with men as well, because we're here together. We don't want to alienate the men. I think it has to be together, and everybody needs to understand, and everybody needs to open up a little bit.
This is about all of us coming together in ways that make organizations and broader society better.
Thank you so much, Melanie. It is exciting, and good luck with the book and beyond leaning in. Thank you.
No, thank you so much for having me.
What a cool conversation, a conversation that needs to happen now, beyond leaning in. Get the book, connect with her, and lean in. Take it from the Ironwoman. We have episodes every Monday. Check in, chime in. There's something for everybody. And Take It from the Ironwoman started out as a book, Global Business Coaching with Sports Parallels. Download the book, write a review, be part of the discussion. Thank you so much. See you next time. Bye-bye.